Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Okay, well, I got an Amazon package.
It says Prime on it.
I know. Let's see what's in it.
It sounds like you don't have a clue.
It's The End of Equality by Mickey Kaus.
Wow, that looks like a brand new. I mean, it actually looks remarkably like the original in terms of cover design. So it doesn't look like anybody, really splurged on redoing the whole thing. But is that a new edition?
No, I needed it because I have like 16 copies of this thing around here, but I couldn't find them.
Mm-hmm.
The place is such a mess. So the simplest thing was just to order a new one from Amazon, which was faster than me finding it.
Are you about to quote from it, Mickey? This is your book. We should remind people that this was reviewed favorably on the cover of the New York Times Book Review back in an era when that mattered even more than it does now.
And unfavorably on the cover of the LA Times Book Review, but who cares about that? There are two threats with the Biden administration, two major threats. Thank you, Georgia. One is immigration, as you know, and you're going to roll your eyes. That's one of my hobby horses.
Nope.
But the other one is this UBI for children, where every child would entitle you to a refundable $300 or $360 a month payment. So it'd be like it's basically like a check from the government.
Subsidizes child rearing, even for the lazy and the shiftless. Is that what you're going to say?
Whether it's like a UBI, whether you work or not, you get the check. Okay, whether you're married or not, whether you work or not, every, and then it phases out at a very high income level. But basically, everybody with a kid would get this check. And I thought that was a terrible idea because, as you say, it would enable a culture of non-work.
That was not my actual view, but yes.
I thought I would seek advice from my former self, because I remember I had a footnote on this subject in this book. And I found it prescient? And damn if my former self wasn't a softie. I said this was okay as long as it was low enough so that you couldn't really live on it. Is. Well, that's the question. I was talking like a $1,500 a year payment.
Mm-hmm.
This is like $3,600 to $4,000 a year for each kid. So if you have two kids, that's $7,000 you get from the government, plus food stamps, another $5,000, plus free medical care. So you're talking about $13,000 plus free medical care. Can you live on that? That's more than welfare payments in a whole bunch of states, as Matt Weidinger of AEI has noted. But it's also in rural areas. I think you can live on that. You can't live on that in Los Angeles. You can't live on that in New York. But you can live on it in New Mexico, Arizona, Alabama, a whole bunch of places. That's enough to survive. Not well, but you could get by. And so
we don't want them to live. Is that it?
We don't want to subsidize people who never, generation after generation, never send anybody into the workforce. That's just not such a good thing for society. So,
but I mean, these aren't necessarily those people. For all you know, these are the sons of corporate titans and daughters of corporate titans.
They're both. They're both, but we don't care about the sons of corporate titans. We care what happens at the bottom of the income ladder. And are we?
I'm just saying you're assuming
we used to call it an underclass, Bob, a society where people don't get married, they don't work, and
No, I'm just
continues generation after generation.
Yeah, I'm just making this small point that at least I don't know how many of the people who would benefit from this are in fact part of an intergenerational chain of people who don't work. For all I know, their parents worked and their children will work, but I don't know.
Right, but there is some number, and it's important to figure out what the number is. One key datum is the length of stay of people on welfare. The old welfare program was quite large. It was like 6 years. So you go on welfare, you stay for 6 years. That's not so good. And when welfare was eliminated and replaced by this other program called TANF in 1996, the work of single moms without a high school education, so high school dropouts. Those are the worst advantaged people in our society. Their work jumped.
My father was a high school dropout, Mickey.
Well, my grandmother never went to high school.
Well, I win because a father is more closely related than a grandparent.
Well,
so do you surrender on this whole issue?
No, because your father, because you deny that people who don't graduate from high school have it tough in this society. I think they do, even if your father succeeded. And their work effort, their work participation jumped 17 percentage points. That's from 45 to about 60.
Wait, whose did? These are
the single moms without a high school education, not necessarily unmarried. Single moms without
a high school education. Their workforce participation jumped in response to what?
After welfare was eliminated. So that's a huge
after workfare. After what you were calling workfare at the time and advocated in that book happened, the Clinton era welfare reform?
Yes, but it's not welfare. Welfare was terminated, was replaced by a program that allegedly had work requirements. So it was time limited and threatened work requirements.
So that increased work participation rate.
And that's a huge jump. And about half was due to the good economy and half was due to the welfare, according to this last study I read. So there are a lot of single moms who never graduated from high school. I mean, so that's some indication that there's a big chunk of the population.
You could ask if the jump, which apparently half of that jump is attributable to the welfare by your own account, the welfare change by your own account, is worth denying money to the 50% or so who were working, and the 30% or so who weren't going to work in any event, didn't work before the change, didn't work after. So you're denying all of them money. I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm just saying it's not a no-brainer.
Well, you could right now we send money, but there's a bit of a work test in that you have to have income. It's an income tax credit. You have to have $2,500 of income. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of potential compromises on this. We could we cover your working people now, and we could increase that now without threatening to subsidize non-working families. That's one possible thing that takes care of half your problem. The other possible thing is suggested by some of these young wonks around Washington, like Sam Hammond and Orrin Cass.
Sam Hammond misrepresented my book, but I'll bring that up later.
Okay. We're being nice to him because he seems.
No, we're not. Influence. I've been meaning to tweet about that for like a year, and I'm making myself a note. His comeuppance is on the way. Okay. Enjoy this part of your career, Samuel Hammond, because it's going to come to an end.
Anyway, you could look back on previous work in the Social Security records and say, okay, you have to have so many quarters of work in the last 10 years, and then you get this check, even if you're not working now. You don't have to measure the work. Are you willing to go to work now? You could say, have you gone to work in the past? That's an interesting idea because it obviates a lot of the bureaucracy. You could just have a computer check your work record, but it doesn't. The Democrats will never go for it because it doesn't cover enough people. But so yes, it's a balancing act, and the question is this check worth so much to people? Even if you extend it the way I've suggested, that it's worth subsidizing the underclass again, and I don't think so. I think that was a decision we made in '96, and it was pretty effective. The poverty rate in 2019 was the lowest in history for blacks, whites, especially for blacks.
Well,
children,
a lot of things had happened,
and we were making tremendous progress. And why screw that up now?
I would say a lot of things had happened by then. Is this the thing that Mitt Romney favors? This legislation?
Yes.
And you say you don't like that? It's
endorsed by all sorts of conservatives, like Ross Douthat and J.D. Vance. I was shocked. My hero, J.D.
Well,
Vance.
Then shouldn't you just give up, Mickey? I mean, come on.
There's a lot of
it
things.
sounds like it's going to happen. Give it up.
A lot of people telling me I should give up on a lot of things, Bob.
Yeah, I've got some others I'd like you to give up on. Would you like me to briefly list them?
It's amazing that Republicans who could be making a big stink about welfare, does that issue not have any traction anymore? This is a recreation of welfare?
Apparently not. You know why?
They're resigned to. There are two parts of this. It's in Biden's COVID bill, which is a temporary 1-year thing, and everybody seems resigned that that's going to pass because they have their 50 Democratic senators, including Manchin and Sinema and Tester and all those people. They have them all lined up to approve it. So even the people who oppose it are consigned that it's going to pass for 1 year, and then later on in the year there'll be a big debate when the Democrats try to make it permanent. And some people are trying to fight that. So it's possible there'll be a big fight about that later.
So maybe one reason these people are supporting it, like J.D. Vance, is that a lot of the people who would benefit from it are these Trump voters whom, in other contexts, you want to spring to the defense of, like immigration and so on. Is that not the case?
One wants to make it possible for them to go to work and earn a decent living, yes. But the ones who are out of work,
the
solution is not to send them checks and say, okay, living the way.
Well, the solution to the short-term problem, if they don't have money, the short-term solution is to actually give them money. But anyway, we've outlined the main trade-offs.
Keep in mind they do have food stamps, and during the Great Recession, food stamps aren't that much, but it's like $5,000 a year. I was very I'm very nasty about food stamps in my book, but during the Great Recession, I was kind of happy food stamps were there, at least providing some cushion.
Okay,
that was the compromise of welfare reform. We kept food stamps, but we changed welfare.
Okay. Meanwhile, on other fronts, I think we can declare victory over the pandemic.
Because we've reached herd immunity.
And did you read this Wall Street Journal piece?
Everybody's read the Wall Street Journal article. It was very good news.
It's by this guy, Marty Makary, Makary, who's at Johns Hopkins Medical School. It seems persuasive on the face of it. I mean, it seems plausible on the face of it. He's saying that natural immunity is being way underestimated for a couple of reasons. He thinks well over 100 million people have had an infection, and that imparts immunity at a greater rate than some people act as if is the case. Meanwhile, you got these vaccinations coming. Mine, by the way, is scheduled for tomorrow. Mickey, have you had yours?
I've had mine, Bob.
How was that experience?
It was weird because they gave it out at a local drugstore. It wasn't one of these mass vaccination sites, and it was not an assembly line operation. You go to the drugstore and you stand in line with the people who have the flu,
and they're like, "Where's Cindy? Does Cindy know how to give shots?"
Yeah, it's like, we can do this. No, we can do this. We think
we can do this, but Cindy's not here. So hand me a hypodermic needle.
Yeah, so it was basically like that. But they did give me a shot of the Moderna, and it knocked me out for a couple days.
Really? That's alarming.
I couldn't sleep the night before, so that could have just been
because you were nervous about the vaccine. Not that I would look down on someone who said yes to that question, but is the answer to that question yes?
No, the answer to the question is because I had RSI from typing so much, and there's that thing.
That's repetitive stress injury, folks.
Yeah, when you go to sleep, all of a sudden, all the things in your hands that you've been. The pain that you've been holding off all day because adrenaline or something, all of that comes and your hands really hurt. So basically my hands hurt so much that I couldn't go to sleep for like 8 hours. So that was.
So you think you actually have repetitive stress injury?
I just that night. Yeah, it's getting worse because I claim that Apple has degraded their keyboard. You want to get into this? I don't think you want to get into this.
I was just going to ask the question we used to ask you when you first brought this up decades ago.
I used to have it really bad.
Okay.
For some reason,
you remember the question we used to ask you mockingly?
There were so many, Bob.
Well, it was like, why aren't you more prolific then if you're really doing so much typing?
Good that you asked, Bob. It's because like the people getting the UBI, I inherited some money and that sapped my work ethic. So when I talk about people where cash saps their work ethic, I'm speaking from experience, Bob.
You know,
I'm not
where
saying that I'm immune to this. Everybody is subject to the temptation that if they have income coming in, why work?
So we should have, what you should be advocating is an inheritance tax.
Well, that's one of the logical consequences. Yes, and there are people.
Do you spend time advocating that?
There are people. No, not lately. There are people. There are people like Warren Buffett who have advocated a total inheritance tax.
Great. Why don't you join them? It would diversify our content.
Then I would have crippling RSI.
Well, we could just talk about it. We could just talk about it. You don't have to write about it. So anyway, yeah. Plus, the good news on the they just found out recently that the Pfizer, and this is probably roughly true of Moderna. They're largely the same thing, I think. That according to this study in Israel, the Pfizer, a single shot of Pfizer gives you 85% efficacy, which is higher than the Johnson & Johnson.
Right, well, I'm thinking they're saying with the Moderna also, they're saying you have to wait 4 weeks for the second shot. And I don't want to wait around here for 4 weeks. I'd like to go on a road trip. And if I have 80% efficacy,
do it.
Why not? They're thinking they should delay the second shot and give everybody the first shot. The first shot's so effective. But Pfizer, I'm a little, I'm rationalizing why I got the.
Don't harsh my buzz, Mickey. Pfizer looks like I think it's Pfizer's what I'm getting. Be careful what you say now. It's a very fragile psychology.
Pfizer is better, and it packs more of a wallop, and like the second shot is very difficult. But
wait, which one packs more of a wallop?
Pfizer.
Shit. How soon does the wallop hit?
The wallop is on the second shot mostly, but it's more. Of a
how soon did yours hit? You got a first shot wallop on your Moderna.
Well, I'm a sensitive flower, Bob.
I've noticed that.
You're not a hardy soul like you.
Well, few rise to that level. But Mickey, I'm serious. How long did it take the wallop to hit? Because I've got to do something like really shortly after this shot.
The wallop hit that evening.
Okay.
Hours. And it continued until the next day, and then I was fine. So
it takes at least 5 hours.
And it wasn't even a wallop. It was like I was tired. Yeah.
Okay.
I could have worked, but I have this money, this income, so I don't have to.
I can only imagine.
Why not go to sleep?
I can only imagine.
Those who snooze, cruise.
I thought they loosed.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ted Cruz.
Let's not go to Ted Cruz just yet. I want to make a point about this. After there was a period of New York when the cases were plummeting like a stone too. And everybody said, we can't explain this. If we reached herd immunity, this was like 4 months ago.
They weren't plummeting this fast.
We hadn't reached herd immunity. So I'm reluctant to buy into this theory that it's over now because we see the same phenomena nationwide.
Well, first of all, they weren't plummeting this fast. As I've noted before, the slope of the curve is much steeper on this round of declines than in either of the previous two rounds.
Not in New York State. Look at New York State.
Oh, look at just New York State. I was comparing national.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, look, this week we dropped yesterday. We dropped barely below 2,000 on the 7-day rolling average for deaths. 2 weeks ago, we were well above 3,000. I mean, it is plummeting.
Yeah. Although previously 2,000 was considered a disaster.
I know this is about the peak of the it's the highest that either of the other two peaks had reached, but still it's just dropping like a stone.
Anyway, it looks great. I've been tweeting about that for weeks, Bob.
You're way ahead of me as usual.
You've taken the correct lesson from that. Okay. Did you want to go to Ted Cruz? I'm happy.
I don't have anything prepared to say. I was just happy to see his misfortune. That's all I have to say. What do you have to say?
No, if he'd sent his wife and kids away and stayed in Texas,
that would have been better.
Would that have been okay, though? Or do you have to subject your whole family to the cold?
Did you see the tweet, Playa de los Bad Ideas?
No.
It was just so funny. Somebody did a Photoshop where they put Ted Cruz. It was the image of him walking through that airport. They put him on a beach, and then they also put. You remember when Chris Christie was caught on the beach? when nobody else in New Jersey was like, it was truly funny. I'm sorry, but there's some real creative genius on Twitter.
I don't really like Ted Cruz, so I'm happy to see him in trouble. I was going to pretend that I was in Cancun now, Bob, and we just recreated. That
would have been great.
That would have been great.
Playa de Beverly Hills.
Right. I'm on the poor side of Beverly Hills, Bob.
You grew up on the wrong side of the track. I lived on the wrong side of tracks in Midland, Texas, dude. Literally. Like the railroad tracks are here, wrong side here. That's where I lived, right side up here.
I've been in Midland, Texas, or was it Odessa? I got the two confused.
Hey, we don't cotton to that kind of.
It's
all flyover country to you, isn't it, Mickey?
Is there a rivalry?
Midland,
no, it's
Odessa. What's the difference?
It's car breaks down, stuck in Texas country. I was there for 6 days, buddy.
Well, Odessa Permian was the football powerhouse, and I think was the inspiration for Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
Midland is the Twin City, which wasn't so famous for its high school football, but
it's a testament
George Bush, George Bush II grew up largely in Midland. We may have lived there at the same time. I wasn't there that long, but that's where my parents are from.
Right.
I digress.
Luckily, you weren't driving when Laura was on the roads.
And fortunately, I wasn't in a car when George was driving during his carefree days, shall we say?
Okay. My only pundit takeaway is it shows how insulated senators are, because the idea that a huge disaster hits your state and you wouldn't have to be out delivering food in a line, a soup kitchen, or doing something to show that you were suffering along with everybody else is unbelievable. I mean, a congressman, I don't think could get away with that.
Well, Bill Scher on the highly regarded DMZ podcast opined that this was a sign that Cruz is basically through. He's given up on being president and so on. But Bill said that before Cruz rushed back and did a video explaining, did various interviews explaining why he had made that mistake. So I don't know. He seems to still have a little fire in his belly.
It's crazy for Cruz to give up. He has as good a chance as anybody. We don't have to like you to elect you president.
Does he though? I mean, his we've talked about this. His timing is just so bad. He gets off the Trump bandwagon at the wrong time. He gets on at the wrong time. Right after January 6th. At the worst. He just.
You claim he's on the Trump bandwagon now, and that's the wrong time? I think it's a good time. I think Nikki Haley screwed up. We talked last week.
No,
she screwed up by jumping off the Trump wagon at the first available opportunistic opportunity, and I predicted she would have to walk it back, and damned if she didn't sort of walk it back. In an article in the Wall Street Journal where she went out of her way to praise Trump's wonderful accomplishments and say he just went wrong after the election.
No.
Was it enough for Trump? No.
What I meant was Cruz, right before the insurrection, getting up and signing on to the rejecting the electoral college votes was
bad for you and me, but was it bad for his chances of getting the nomination?
I don't know. Looked kind of awkward at the time. The other bad timing was getting defiantly off the bandwagon at the Republican convention. But anyway,
that was a mistake.
He's a complete. I would consider him dangerous if I didn't consider him so transparently false. I don't know. But, look, I wouldn't have thought Trump would have caught on for different reasons. But Cruz seems so obviously fake. He seems like an actor playing like the fake evangelist in the movie. His father was a preacher. And I'm sure he picked up some of his oratorical skills from him. Right.
Yes. He was playing a constructive role in the Senate, apart from the election business, which I agree he went off the rails there. And he is one of the smartest people around.
He is smart.
He has that. I mean, I told you I was on a welfare conference call where he was completely unprepared, and there was a welfare expert on the call, and he was so much better than the welfare expert.
Mm-hmm.
So he can fake it really well.
But he can really, he can go serious McCarthyite on you. He actually looks like Joseph McCarthy a little. Turns out I forget the details.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I know. There's
a famous interview with Ann Coulter and Larry King, may he rest in peace, where she wrote a book defending Joe McCarthy, and Larry King couldn't quite understand. He kept going, "Oh, but he's Joe McCarthy. I mean, you're against him, right?" And she goes, "No, I'm for him." Like,
yeah,
he just didn't understand. The whole interview was like that for half an hour.
I'm warming up to Larry King now. Speaking of broadcasters who either should or shouldn't rest in peace, depending on your perspective, Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's bringing up the obvious point about Limbaugh because they're being, even Peggy Noonan, who wasn't very nice to him. The point that you're not supposed to say, because you're not supposed to say nasty things about the dead. And I sort of liked Rush Limbaugh. He made politics entertaining for a lot of people who are a lot better educated about politics than they would be. And James Fallows also used to note that you really have to listen to Rush Limbaugh because he makes serious arguments. He's not just a demagogue.
Mm-hmm.
But he destroyed Trump's presidency by egging Trump on to buy into this, don't worry about COVID, it's just the flu, it's a liberal conspiracy argument, which was plausible enough, but it was turned out to be completely misguided.
Do we know?
And Trump, destroyed his presidency by buying into that.
Do we know that Rush is the one who is responsible for that?
We don't know that he's responsible, but when Trump was buying it and very few other people were pushing it, Rush was one of the big voices pushing it. So who knows? But
Bannon was pushing the other way. Should have followed Steve.
Yeah, I mean, Trump had a tremendous demagogic opportunity. We're closing our borders against these foreigners who are bringing disease into our country. I mean, why didn't he, as Rich Lowry pointed out, why not go in that direction if you're going to go whole hog in one direction or the other? Anyway, so I think he, the country.
You know what I didn't realize is that the reason Rush was possible, I guess, is because Reagan revoked the Fairness Doctrine. Is that right?
Well, the Fairness Doctrine was revoked. I assume it was a Congress that did it.
No, I'm not sure it was a congressional.
Maybe the FCC did it.
Yeah, I believe it may have been done at the level of the FCC by Reagan. And I mean, we should stop and do the historical, the counterfactual here. And, what if, because the whole wave of right-wing talk radio was ushered in for whatever reason, liberals just don't catch on as talk radio hosts by and large. I mean, look, as a liberal, when I go back and ask how America got to this degree of polarization, I see, more cases where I'm blaming the right. If you're on the right, you look and you see lots of cases where liberals are responsible. Fine. I grant that. But you got to admit, Rush is a big one. And the whole wave of right-wing radio he ushered in. And, in terms of amping up the tribalism. And who knows if the Fairness Doctrine had not been revoked? I don't know. Now, once the internet age came, it became more and more of a moot point whether the Fairness Doctrine.
I mean, the tribalism was always there, waiting to be tapped, and the question is who would do it, right? Well, he did it before the internet.
You can argue. I mean, but it would be a different world. Who knows? I mean,
the Fairness Doctrine was a crock. I mean, basically it meant. You got pablum because the stations were scared to air any opinions, because then the Fairness Doctrine, they could be sued. And of course, being sued is the least efficient way to accomplish anything. And since the press is liberal biased, they don't want to, they certainly don't want to have any extreme conservatives. So they didn't want to they couldn't even say extreme liberal things, because then they'd have to have an extreme conservative on.
Well, I'm not,
so it just produced a bunch of paps.
I'm not taking a position. I'm just, although I'm not necessarily taking a position against the Fairness Doctrine either. I'm just pointing out that I think it was consequential, as was its revocation. Now, here's a question. You're the one who pointed out to me that Father Coughlin, who at one point had 30 million radio listeners, was basically pushed off the air by the Roosevelt administration, which turns out to be true. In fact, I think he is the reason they started demanding that radio stations get federal permits, that they get broadcasting licenses. And then they also, they shut down his newspaper, too. I was just reading up on this because of the Rush thing.
Did I say that? That's very smart.
I thought you were the one. I mean, because a friend of mine said, hey, things may seem bad now in terms of demagoguery, but remember, Father Coughlin at one point had 30 million listeners.
Maybe it's in my book that the guy who wrote this was a lot smarter than I am now. So maybe it's all.
I got to say, when I look back at stuff I wrote a long time ago, he does.
I don't remember saying that, but I'm glad you credited me with.
No, I thought I told you that my friend said, hey, well, this is reassuring. Father Coughlin was in this position, but he had his, he had his fall. But it turns out they strong-armed him. I mean, the way they shut down his newspaper, which, by the way, can you guess the name of his very influential mailed newsletter or whatever?
Coughlin Files.
Social Justice. He was a lefty. I didn't realize what a lefty he was.
Yeah. That's very Putin-esque to just pick off the particular.
Anyway, opponents. They threatened him with sedition charges to get his newspaper shut down. And so anyway, are you against what they did to Father Coughlin? Getting
yes,
his,
of course.
You are.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Why would I not be?
I don't know, because he strikes some people as a very menacing figure, anti-Semitic. Although I think the main reason they wanted him out of the picture was because he opposed U.S. involvement in World War II, probably.
Anyway, I feel warmly about Limbaugh, but I think he fucked up, and the country would be better off if he'd retired 4 years ago.
Well, that's what Matt Lewis. I mean, for a lot of people, Limbaugh was genuinely influential. Apparently, he single-handedly converted Andrew Breitbart from a run-of-the-mill liberal to a conservative, according to Steve Bannon. Matt Lewis on the aforementioned DMZ podcast was talking about what a formative influence Rush was on him. And he says Rush really did take a dark turn and I don't think this is the same thing you're talking about.
No.
But he just says he got darker and darker. Of course, he had the addiction to opiates. Yeah. And
Breitbart said he was radicalized by the Clarence Thomas hearings, which is bizarre. But
well, I didn't say radicalized. I said turned from a liberal to a conservative in the first place.
That's what I meant.
That's what Bannon says.
As we know, we can trust everything Steve Bannon says because soon Donald Trump will replace Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, according to Bannon. That's his latest plot. Are you behind on your Bannon?
Wait, I told you that 3 weeks ago.
Oh, you did?
Okay. Is he still saying that? I haven't been tuning into him this week.
It just hit the reporters today.
I literally told you this on this podcast.
Okay.
Right after, I don't know, it was either right after January 6th or right after inauguration.
Okay.
He wanted Trump to run for Congress in Florida, immediately just be elected speaker long enough to impeach Biden and then step down as speaker, apparently. But
why does he have to? You don't have to be in Congress to be speaker. Why doesn't Bannon go all the way and just say they should elect him speaker, period?
You don't have to be in Congress to be speaker?
No, this is a standard. It's a standard thing that comes. It's like you don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. It's possible to be speaker without being in Congress. And it's always speculated, but it will never, ever happen. So
if there was a time, look, if somebody brings it up, okay. I mean, first they have to take Congress. That's a good point. So we wouldn't know until. He's
shown no capacity to wheel and deal. He'd be a terrible speaker.
Final thing on Rush. Okay. A number of people, I think this came up on DMZ, but other people have compared Limbaugh to William F. Buckley. And okay, I grant that your point that Limbaugh was more cerebral than your average talk radio host. Still, he was no William F. Buckley in terms of his intellectual sophistication, certainly in terms of his, diplomatic finesse, his civility, in terms of his just sheer brains. He was no William F. Buckley. Like what what does it say about us? I mean, this is not a newsflash if you look at the general tenor of discourse in America, but the fact that the analogous figure to William F. Buckley in, a couple decades later is Rush Limbaugh, 3 decades later. I mean,
good point. Though Buckley had a similar phenomenon, which is if you go to his early works when he was at Yale, got him at Yale, they're absolutely brilliant and incredibly smart and nuanced. And he didn't get smarter as he got older.
Oh, that's weird because you and I are both getting sharper. My memory is improving. How is yours? How is yours doing?
It's I have a long list of things I got wrong last week, so I don't think
and you remember them.
But
that's amazing. You're amazing.
I'm Sudafed today, so
you did take your Sudafed.
I should be like razor sharp. But there's another. Why isn't the equivalent of William F. Buckley today Eric Weinstein on Clubhouse?
That's a scarier thought.
Or all these podcast people, some of whom are pretty sharp.
Well, first of all, I mean, as they pointed out, maybe Matt said this, Buckley could read people out of the movement. He could say, no, this is not a real conservative, and it would be a real problem for that person. And Limbaugh could do the same thing.
He tried to read Pat Buchanan out of the movement by saying he was anti-Semitic, and Mike Kinsley Mike Kinsley wrote a thing saying that Buchanan was anti-Semitic, and Leon Wieseltier wrote a thing saying Buchanan wasn't anti-Semitic, which Kinsley interpreted as Leon saying, I decide who's anti-Semitic around here, buddy.
Plus, I doubt Leon believed that. There's almost no chance Leon believed that.
I hope I'm remembering this right. Leon, don't
you know what? It could be the opposite. I remember Mike was appearing on Crossfire with Buchanan as his counterpart. I can't believe that during that period he wrote something.
The story only works, and I think the story is true, if Kinsley decided he was anti-Semitic.
Leon, I know, wrote do I know this? I know Leon was saying Buchanan was anti-Semitic, and I think he wrote one of the unsigned editor's editorials.
Okay. Well, I may be misremembering it. Anyway, I think that was sort of a half successful attempt to read Buchanan out of the movement, and Buchanan would have taken himself out of the movement anyway because he became more populist by himself. Anyway, yes, I agree that Limbaugh was no William F. Buckley, but I don't know. Well,
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he had the kind of influence to actually play kingmaker to some extent, at least. I mean, there are people.
Limbaugh did or Buckley did?
I'm saying Limbaugh did. I thought you said Limbaugh was no William F. Buckley. Did you mean William F. Buckley was no Limbaugh?
I meant in intellect. You said we said Buckley was
certainly true. But didn't Buckley get expel the John Birchers basically?
Yes.
Okay, that's power.
And you're saying Limbaugh didn't have that power?
No, I'm saying they both had that power, but Limbaugh was stupider.
Who did Limbaugh expel?
Politics isn't my game. Go listen to the DMZ or somebody. Okay. There are cases of him. It works both ways, either kingmaker or king killer. I mean,
apparently he had it in for Peggy Noonan later in life, and I think Peggy Noonan's still around, still a conservative. Didn't expel her.
Well, you can't kill a columnist career. I think there are surely there are examples of Limbaugh either anointing someone, because I definitely heard a number of people talk about the sheer power of Limbaugh, and also the influence in the sense of persuading, and maybe I think his larger influence was persuading youngish people to either take conservatism seriously or more seriously.
Yep, right. Everybody wanted to be Limbaugh's anointed successor, and I guess there isn't one, which means it's a free-for-all.
Well, the media environment is more of a free-for-all now.
Right, but if he groomed and anointed somebody, it might have actually established that person. Maybe not. Another conservative passed away, important conservative, Tom Bethel, who was
I barely know the name. He used to write for Harper's.
He wrote for Harper's. He wrote for the Washington Monthly. Before that, I knew him when he was writing for the Washington Monthly. A lovely, civilized guy. Never got up before 12. You were told never to call him before 12. That's my kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he lives to 84, so how unhealthy could that be? And
what was he doing up until like 4 a.m. or whatever?
Writing, working.
Wow. God bless him.
Anyway, he coined the phrase "strange new respect." Invented the concept, an important concept. He spent most of the later part of his life attacking Darwin, and I'm amazed you haven't heard of him.
Oh, it's
big article. Harper's attacking Darwin. And
I'd repressed this, I think.
And he eventually wrote a book attacking Darwin. Got in a big debate with Richard Lewontin. How do you pronounce his name?
Well, Lewontin, that's a different argument. Richard Lewontin, he's a Harvard. He's a lefty, a Stephen Jay Gould ally, who had his own beefs with mainstream interpretations of Darwin. But if Bethel was a flat out, creationist or didn't buy natural selection, then Lewontin would have argued with him. Yes,
I suspect he didn't buy natural selection.
Yeah,
I met another one of those guys. I told you and friend of Ann Coulter's, who also wrote a book, I think, attacking Darwin. And I love the gossip they have, because it's like, it's like speculating whether people are gay, and gays tend to think that more people are gay than, well, not that I think everybody's gay, but
yeah, you do actually.
Most people,
I could name names, by the way. Just remember, I have the power to mention people that you have said to me privately you think may be gay.
That reminds me.
No, okay, never mind. Whatever you're going to say.
Okay.
Disarmament talks will begin in the Parrot Room.
Okay. But they say so-and-so, they say, Noam Chomsky has doubts about Darwin, but he can't express them in public, but he knows the scientific record isn't there to back it up. And, so they have all these secret allies that they think exist throughout the scientific firmament.
Well, Thomas Nagel is among the truly brilliant people who have written their doubts about it. I mean, I think his argument was flawed, but he is someone, I know of one specific flaw in his argument, but he's somebody you'd have to take seriously. He's a great thinker.
Well, anyway, I think you have to take Bethel seriously, but maybe you could dispose of his arguments. But since we don't know what they are, we can't really talk about them.
Nope.
Anyway, he was a great man, and it's very sad that he died. And there was, of course, another guy also named Tom Bethel who worked at the Washington Monthly who was on the left, which caused some confusion.
That's pretty strange. It's not that common a name.
No, I know. The Monthly was a strange place, and perhaps still is.
Bill Scher is writing there now, of the aforementioned.
Good. There is Epstein news.
Oh, I'm excited. What is it?
Well, Ira Rosen, who wrote a memoir of his time as a producer at 60 Minutes, says that he tried to get the Trump tapes, the Epstein's Trump tapes from Ghislaine Maxwell by allegedly tricking her, saying, I want those Trump tapes. And instead of saying there are no Trump tapes, she said, I can't give them to you because then you'll have to, I know how the news mind works. You're going to have to come up with the Hillary tapes too. And I'm for Hillary. And so I'm not going to give you the Trump tapes.
And from that, he infers that there are Bill Trump and Hillary tapes. That I glanced at that item actually, and it seemed pretty thin to me. I mean,
he infers that there are Trump tapes, which is, I've always not quite believed, and who knows what's on them. It could just be, Trump not talking about himself for 20 minutes. And that's a scandal.
That would be amazing.
But Ghislaine seems to be a horny woman, man. She, according to him,
Mickey, that's the Parrot Room way of putting it.
She's constantly saying, if you come over to my house and have sex with me, I'll tell you all about. She didn't say I'll give you the Trump tapes. See, he would have done that, but he said I'll I'll tell you all about my father's.
Wait, this is according to this guy? According to this guy, she was begging
according
him.
to this guy who claims implausibly when she said, if I give you the Trump tapes, you'll have to do the Hillary tapes too. Supposedly he said, I will follow this story wherever it leads. Okay, no, I don't believe he said that.
Including into your bedroom.
Making himself look big.
This guy is sounding more dubious to me by the minute. Whenever a guy tells you that a woman is begging him to have sex with her, he's almost certainly
This is
lying.
Ghislaine Maxwell. She seems to have been a unique character.
When did this allegedly happen?
Many sources who say that she was not a chaste.
I think it's safe to say that she was not chaste. I think there is enough evidence on the record of that.
I don't know.
Yes.
It could be a libel suit, Bob. I would watch it.
I said that. When did this supposedly happen?
The thing I was about to say really was a libel suit, so I think
I bailed you out. Yeah. No. You were getting perilously close to Parrot Room talk there, and I wanted to help you.
Well, the libel laws apply in the Parrot Room too, Bob.
Yeah, but the things you say are less likely to be discovered, except by people who go to patreon.com/Parrot Room.
Anyway,
and I'm not going to say more because you've been complaining about how I always pimp the Parrot Room. I'm going to stop. Right. We'll just see what happens to Parrot Room patronage now that I'm ceasing my marketing operation. I'm going to turn it over to you, okay? If you're such a marketing genius, all yours from now on.
On thin ice, Bob.
Although I will be revealing my comorbidity in tonight's Parrot Room. I'm not kidding.
I've completely lost my train of thought. Anyway, I've always been skeptical that there were Trump tapes, but now that I would just assume that Trump departed the scene. I mean, he has this war with McConnell, which threatens, as many have noted, to completely stamp out the search for an alternative to Trump for a couple of years. What Trump did in Georgia.
Wait, flesh that out. You're saying that McConnell, by opposing Trump, has ensured that Trump is the avatar of Trumpism?
Well, Trump has started a feud with McConnell. McConnell started a feud with Trump. And so people are choosing sides. Are you for McConnell or are you for Trump? And this is, as they say, sucking the oxygen out of the room that should be used to say, is Ron DeSantis the heir apparent, or is Ted Cruz screwed himself, or should we vote for J.D. Vance, or is Josh Hawley screwed? I
think impeachment had the same effect. That was part of this effect of galvanizing Trump's base. But I digress.
Possibly, but McConnell has sort of galvanized the other half. So we have a pitched battle. And how do you make your voice heard in the middle of a civil war? I don't know.
So you're saying that, I mean, one theory is that it's the donors who wanted McConnell to take his stand against Trump, which he did very vociferously a couple of times. And now he's like, let it rest. But you're saying they did exactly the opposite of the smart thing, because they did that presumably because they wanted Trump out of the picture. You're saying it's had exactly the opposite effect.
Oh, I don't think it gets Trump out of the picture. Yes, it's stupid.
Well, why do you think McConnell did it?
Well, I think he really was outraged and
oh, come on.
And he
Mitch McConnell,
he has to compensate for voting not to impeach, not to convict. I don't know. There's an article that says he had no choice, and I didn't read it, so I don't know what. But donor influence could be a big thing. I mean, McConnell is very overly concerned with money, as Dick Morris points out in the column. That's how he blew Georgia. You back Purdue because he can raise money, and you back Loeffler, who was a terrible candidate because she's rich and could spend money, and ignore Collins, who doesn't have as much money but has some purchase with the base. And as a result, they lost the seat. Money just doesn't make as big a difference as it used to make, and McConnell's living in the world of money.
I hope that's true.
So there's going to be a big fight between Purdue money and Collins no money in the race to unseat Warnock in 2 years. So in 2 years, the Republicans could take back the Senate just by beating Warnock. Should be possible, although Warnock's a pretty good candidate. So anyway, my point is, what Trump did contributing to blowing Georgia. I mean, I'm living with the result of blowing Georgia, which is we might have an immigration amnesty, we might have this revitalization of the dole, all because the Republicans lost Georgia. Trump clearly blew it in Georgia. He didn't give a shit about whether the Republicans won. That's unforgivable. Screw him. I hope there are tapes of him and underage girls. That would be great. And I hope they come out soon and remove him from the scene.
Okay.
My soundbite of the day, Bob.
Is it going to happen? You need to make a prediction.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. I hope it's going to happen. Issakov's podcast speculates that they're going to actually succeed in convicting Trump in Georgia for some shenanigans in his call to the Secretary of State. I don't believe that.
Well, you mean the federal prosecutor is?
I don't know which prosecutor. Anyway,
well, there is. I think Biden did replace the federal prosecutor in Georgia, and I think there are movements in that direction. But I also thought there was maybe a state level case against Trump.
I think the local Atlanta Fulton County prosecutor is going after him too. I think that's what
that would be better. That would be much better.
But, a lot of Republicans, of course, like me, Republicans who, like me, also who is not a Republican, are hoping that Trump is convicted of something and removed from the scene that way.
What about that video?
Take care of a lot of business.
What about the N-word video? What's the name of that producer? The Survivor producer who? I know.
What?
There were such robust.
There's so
rumors.
many N-word videos. What?
Well, right, but Trump saying it. I mean, there were so many rumors 4 years ago.
I don't think that'd do it for Trump. It works at the New York Times, but I don't think it works for Trump.
No, it's true. It's actually more of a general election bid than anything else, I guess. It would have an effect. But
yes, maybe being in jail wouldn't even stop Trump. I mean, who knows?
It's a good question. Well, what effect do you think the Twitter thing has had? And we don't know whether that will endure. I mean, Twitter could let him back on, but it seems to me like, I read somewhere that he declared war on Mitch McConnell, but it just didn't feel the same as things felt to me when he was on Twitter.
But I guess I was working on the standard pundit take that it actually helped Trump to be off Twitter because people really got sick of him as president, and he took a break and let Biden take the stage and have his flaws come out. And then you go and attack Biden and you seem like a respectable enemy as opposed to this guy we couldn't stand.
Yeah, but he can't just terrorize the politician of his choice the same way he could on Twitter, right? Because he needs some gatekeepers. They have to let him on Fox or at least.
Right. And so the key will be, will they let him back on by the time the Republican primaries are held for Congress and various seats? And I don't know the answer to that. Bill Gates said that they should let him back on, but Bill Gates has said a lot of things.
Bill Gates,
the guy who created the Office product that you're so fond of.
Don't get me started. That's interesting. I didn't know Bill Gates was opining about things like that.
He opines about everything. He's the new Felix Roten. I want him to tell me who's going to win the Stanley Cup.
Okay.
So,
you know what I heard? I heard a very good thing about him from someone who worked closely with him. They said the difference between him and Steve Ballmer. Do you know what the difference was? This reminds me of Trump. There's a sense in which
company and Ballmer destroyed it.
Well, there's that, but this actually sheds light on it, and it's a sense in which Ballmer is more like Trump. This woman said that Gates. Whenever he was in a room with people, he would use them as information gathering resources. He would ask people questions, find out what they knew, tap their expertise. When Ballmer was in a room, he would just talk.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me, Biden gave a town hall where they did a fact check on it, and of course, the old Biden was back, and he was just bullshitting right and left, and he said 4 or 5 things that were just completely wrong. And, the fact checkers for Biden, they provide a helpful paragraph saying, what he must have really meant was this and this and this, but, he got the facts a little wrong.
I have a good data point on this.
there was something about a $9 billion tax loophole for racehorse owners, which I don't quite believe, which they couldn't find any analog in reality for. And it reminded me of the time in 87 when Newsweek knocked Biden out of the race because he spouted a similar paragraph full of bullshit in a coffee clutch in New Hampshire. And standards were higher then, and you couldn't get away with the full paragraph of bullshit. Of course, now standards are lower, and it's no impediment at all. But I was trying to think of the ways that I still think Biden's bullshit is a little different than Trump's bullshit. I don't think
totally.
I don't think Biden really thinks he can build an alternative reality. He just
no. I mean, he's totally different.
People.
Trump is sui generis. I mean,
but Trump is sort of making it up as he goes along too, but he's making it up in a sort of different, more deep way, I think.
No, it's just like a reflex that Trump just says the thing that's most flattering for him that's not true, and he says it emphatically, and it's just habitual and
he
pervasive.
Sort of expects it to last, and you think Biden doesn't really expect anybody to believe it after the event. He just wants to get by the event, and if you fact check him, he says, "Oh, why are you fact checking me? That's stupid." Whereas Trump actually wants whatever.
Well, among his followers, among 47% of the voters or something, it apparently does. I mean, among some huge chunk of people, he's persuasive. Now, here's an example of the kind of thing you were alluding to. So Glenn Kessler is like the fact checker for the Washington Post, right? I mean, he does their column on the fact checker or whatever. His job is to, examine things that Biden says and that Trump said and assign them a number of Pinocchios and blah, blah, blah. So here's a tweet for him that I think is so ill-advised given his job description that I complained about it in my newsletter, the Nonzero newsletter. And it was when Biden, he had said in an interview something like, when we started, there were no vaccines or something indicating that, they had zero vaccines when he entered office. Not true. Anyway, Kessler tweets, it was a verbal stumble, a typical Biden gaffe, as he had already mentioned 50 million doses being available when he took office. Ex-Trump officials should especially cool the outrage meter, as it just looks silly. Now, am I crazy to think, like, if your job description is to be the fact checker, you just shouldn't? Am I wrong? It sounds like you're going to say I'm wrong.
Well, he said that right after he had admitted the possibility of vaccines in the same paragraph. So he was confused, but it doesn't disguise the big lie, which is the entire Biden administration is saying there was no plan for vaccinations, when we took office. Well, when you took office, they were already vaccinating at a million a day, which was your goal. So don't say there was no plan. Obviously, there was something was happening, and you could improve it. But it's a sign of how the Biden people think that the press is on their side, that they thought they could get away with that. So that was of a piece with that. But it was a little much. Kessler went a little overboard defending Biden, but he's this was the old motor mouth Biden where he doesn't really care. And I'm like that too. I do that regularly on this show, but I'm not president of the United States,
By the way, this is kind of related. Did you get it? Did you pay attention to this whole Slate Star Codex controversy? New York Times piece about the Slate Star, the former Slate Star Codex blog.
It was a terrible, terrible piece. And Matt Iglesias's post on the piece explained what rationalism is to me in a way I had not understood.
Yeah, that was
before.
interesting.
But aside from the fact that it was just a terrible, half-assed, mediocre piece on Slate Star Codex, I have no opinions about it.
No, the whole thing has made me interested in this rationalism thing that I was only dimly aware of. Anyway, the piece is by this guy, Cade Metz. I had a what I thought was a very interesting conversation about it with Will Wilkinson, because Will is kind of from that milieu originally. The rationalists, like, there's a big libertarian contingent, and they're all about, being rational, I guess. And he has gotten somewhat disenchanted with the movement. So it was an interesting conversation. It's in the Wright Show podcast feed.
It was I forget what is the they were trying to taint him with racism and association with Charles Murray.
The thing that sounds like it was unfair, and the thing that sounded to me most unfair in the piece, the piece, it was about this guy who had written the Slate Star Codex blog. It's now a Substack newsletter called Astral Codex 10. His pseudonym was Scott Alexander when he was doing the blog, and it was because the New York Times was going to blow his cover and mention his real name, which is Siskind is the last name, Scott Alexander Siskind. That tension between the two started months and months ago. But wait, what was I saying?
You're saying the central libel of the piece was
yeah. So the piece makes it sound like he agreed with Charles Murray on the question of race and genetics and IQ.
Right.
And,
it was very
and he didn't. He apparently, according to Siskind at least, he agreed with Murray about something totally. He agreed with Murray about, it was much more actually about the plight of white middle American working class people, although it wasn't strictly speaking confined to them. It was more in the, I forget what it was. It was more in the deaths of despair.
It was saying that we shouldn't expect laid off manufacturing workers to learn to code. And
right. That was it.
And we shouldn't expect their sons to do it either. So that brings up the whole Murray argument that, if it's cultural or genetic, who cares? And it seems to me, even if you say it's cultural, you're at least considering the genetic. It didn't seem as unfair as it was very unfair, but it was in the same territory, and I've been in that territory too.
Well, it wasn't. Wasn't Murray? There was a phase when he was writing, I think, largely about the white, the plight of like white workers in middle America addicted to opiates and blah, blah, right? And I was thinking that it was in that context that
I'm sure it was.
Well, okay, then it's even further removed.
It's removed from race, but it's not removed from IQ as genetic.
Well, fine. Nobody denies that there is that there is some genetic component to IQ. Right. But
it's the idea that poor people are stupider than rich people is still controversial. And interestingly, it should be controversial. Interesting, there was an incredible chart I saw this week about SAT scores by quarters of income.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just took the best SAT scores, colleges, the argument was colleges would be much more mixed by class than they are now. They would have people from the bottom quartile, and that sort of completely counter whatever one thinks after reading a bunch of Charles Murray, and counter to what I had actually thought, which was that that IQ is important and that we were settling out in a centrifuge-like thing with the people with high IQs were vaulted into the upper class. No, there's still a whole bunch of really smart people who are in the bottom quartile, according to this chart, an incredibly large number, and it's only because colleges are so desperate to have rich people who are going to contribute to them that they are so class biased.
So wait, what was the finding exactly? That the correlation between essay score and income was not as high as had been?
That if you took top SAT scores from just across the board, you would be like 45% rich people, and instead Princeton is 72% rich people. I'm making up the 45 figure, but I'll send you the chart. But it was
okay.
It was stunning. It was and very encouraging, very optimistic. That there are people like you, Bob, who are plucked from the wrong side of the tracks and sent to Princeton.
So true.
Because they got good test scores.
Thank you, Mickey.
We've written about that.
I haven't written about me, have I? I should.
Yeah, you wrote a cover story for the New Republic. I'm sure you had a paragraph there about how the SATs helped you.
I bet I've never written that.
Okay, I'll bet you.
What cover story are you even talking about?
You attack the people who coach for the SAT.
I don't even think I wrote that piece. That was when I was acting editor. I think I assigned it.
Okay, but you wrote between you and me. You actually.
I doubt I had the guy who wrote it mention me. I doubt I had him put in a paragraph about me. Could be, but I doubt it.
Well, then you might win your bet.
Now, who was it? Was that
true.
Will Salat? Did Will Salatin write that? I remember it was some.
I don't know.
Someone young and malleable.
Huh. And rewritable. So maybe you did write it.
I considered everyone rewritable.
Are those days gone? Because now if you try to rewrite something, they'll just say, fuck you, I'm going to publish it on Substack.
Well, there's that. Plus, I mean, the standards are lower for what constitutes good writing. Because, you know, people, for one thing, the economics of journalism don't permit people to really slave over the writing and polish it. And also, let's face it, actual writing skills of like college age students have declined. Isn't that conventional wisdom and widely asserted? I don't know if it's
conventional wisdom.
I believe it's.
I do note that on Substack, people go on and on and on, and there's no editor to tell them, no, you should cut it in half. And do readers like that? Because I'm planning on like countering that by being short. But I have a feeling readers may hate that. They like Matt Iglesias going on for 10,000 words.
They're fine with short, but they'll let you get by with long if they love you. And a lot of people love Matt. I love him.
And Glenn Greenwald, I mean, who has time to read an entire Glenn Greenwald post when it can be summarized in a tweet?
Apparently, according to Substack, tens of thousands of people are paying for his newsletter.
Yeah.
Which and I forget how much, $5, $6, $7 a month. Do the math, folks. Do the math. You too could be Glenn Greenwald, which is not actually true, but it is what Substack would like you to believe. What?
With enough Sudafed, anything is possible.
I'm glad to hear you feeling your oats, Mickey. I've been trying to talk you into going paid with your newsletter, but we can continue that discussion in the Parrot Room. Speaking of which, you want to know how long we've been speaking?
An hour and 10 minutes.
Hour and 7 minutes. That was very good. So
it's a Sudafed.
So maybe we should be wrapping it up.
One more thing. One more topic. Is the January 6th in the Capitol. There are now doubts that Sicknick was the officer who died. There's certainly doubts that he died by being hit with a fire extinguisher, but that's now become a just sort of murky area where we officially sort of don't know how he died.
We discussed that in the Parrot Room last week, but go ahead.
Right, but the sort of there's this trend on the right to sort of I think minimize what happened there by saying, well, it's all very murky and only these two people died by suicide and this person was just trampled to death and this person had so it was all less bad than we thought.
Let's have another ransacking of the Capitol.
On the other hand, I hate the word insurrection. It seems to me what happened was a riot. If you have an insurrection, you bring more guns and you seize control of the TV station, and it was just a fucking riot, and people die in riots all the time. Riots are deadly, horrible things.
Well, there were probably some people with insurrectional
riot.
There were some insurrection-minded people, but I personally use riots there on the side of conservative. By the way, on NPR this morning, I heard something that would probably drive you nuts. They said, in a repertorial mode, Josh Hawley, they referred to the famous or infamous picture of him raising his fist in support of insurrectionists before they attacked the Capitol. Well, even if you consider them insurrectionists, they weren't that before. They were not identifiably that before they attacked the Capitol. That's kind of hard.
And most of the people stayed on the mall and didn't attack the Capitol. So,
do you know when that picture was taken? By the way,
I don't. But
I'd like to know.
But that reminds me. And there were self-styled idiot insurrectionists. So yes, I was stunned when I saw that they described themselves that way. But there was an important thing in the timeline of Trump's completely inadequate response to the riot, which is we've been making a big deal. Well, obviously it's big that he tweeted against Pence. Huge. But the question is, it now turns out, according to Mike Lee, that the tweet against Pence came 2 minutes before the phone call with Tommy Tuberville where Tuberville tells Trump they just took Mike Pence away for safety.
Well, that could be played either way anyway. As you pointed out, if the call had come before the tweet, you could say, well, Trump knew he had been ushered to safety then. Look, the damning thing.
No, I just wanted to raise that point.
Yeah, that call never mattered to me. The damning thing is that Trump was watching cable TV. It had been reported long ago that they violated the perimeter of the Capitol, and some minutes ago that they were in the Capitol, and that's when he tweeted that basically that Mike Pence had betrayed his country. I mean, don't get me started. It's unbelievable.
No, okay,
it's unbelievable.
I'm not dissenting from you there. I'm with you there. Is it? There's sort of three inexcusable things that Trump did in the waning days of his presidency. One is screwing up the pandemic, which probably you can argue about how much effect that had, but I sort of don't like it. And the two unforgivable things are that and blowing Georgia. So screw him.
There you go.
You're
late to the party, but I'm glad you showed up.
Bring on the tapes. Let's go to the videotape.
Let's go to those videotapes. So let's go to that Parrot Room where there are some things we didn't get to that I want to talk about. Oh, I want to talk about Iran. There may be no Iran negotiations. We'll see. I want to talk about Iran. I want to, there's HBO is apparently coming out with a documentary about the Woody Allen, Mia Farrow alleged child abuse thing. I want to talk about that. What's that? I haven't seen the documentary, but I have views. There's a
documentary about Khashoggi too.
Oh, we can talk about that.
Supposedly names. You're going to argue that Tony Blinken is being too tough with Iran.
I'm not sure who it is. It is probably him. Yeah, I mean, someone in the administration is making this a lot harder than it has to be. And there are more signs that that's a kind of concerted effort to make it hard. I don't have all that much. I don't have a lot of inside info, but it's kind of disturbing. I want to talk about the Ben Smith piece on the McNeil case, the McNeil firing at the Times. Did you read that?
The one that said that there are all these good restaurants in this obscure town in Peru. Yes, I read it. I didn't have much of a takeaway from that, so I look forward to you supplying me one.
Well, for one, I always just like to troll you by mentioning Ben Smith. That's about 30% of it. But
then I show pictures of my fabulously large apartment and give the lie to Ben Smith's falsehood.
But you're not in the building. That's not the apartment he was writing about when he wrote that you had a small apartment, Mickey.
I was holding this one in reserve, Bob.
And if he were a good reporter, he would have known that.
Yes,
he would have found out.
If he was a good reporter, he would have fucking seen my apartment before he said it was small. Yes.
Mickey, you're sounding actually agitated.
Bob. It's a drive-by shooting.
Agitated.
It's good when I'm agitated. That brings in the ratings.
So I'm talking about that. Plus, bonus comorbidity content.
Great.
It's an amazing comorbidity.
Look forward to it.
But that's it. But seriously, from now on, you can be in charge of marketing. If you think if you're embarrassed by my attempt to make the Parrot Room,
maybe there should be some gimmick, like I tell the parrot, no plugging.
Oh, by the way. Okay, but this is the last thing I'll say. We're very close to that 750 threshold.
We were at it, Bob, and we lost too.
Did we?
Yes.
That's probably my fault. It's probably something I said. You're right. We're at 748 patrons. Okay. Well, then I guess I will have to deliver.
Not that I'm keeping count.
No, me either. You never looked. I never looked. We do it out of love.
Okay.
Okay. Let me find the way to shut this off, and then we will proceed to the Parrot Room. Okay. We will see you there.
See you later.